Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about skipping steps. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, do you think that there is a more detrimental quote-unquote shortcut in developing software than skipping step of the software development lifecycle to get something released faster for a deadline? Yes, there are worse things than skipping steps, because skipping steps is really not the main factor that determines whether or not you have good quality or not, uh, or if the code is working, etc. etc. These are just supplements that you add in to create a consistent workflow. It's similar to how I tell people that if you think that because there was this period, and I suppose it's still there in a sense, where these frameworks, especially in JavaScript land, where the key you can almost play for JavaScript framework keyword bingo. If they say that it's lightweight and blazingly fast, that's like the basics, and everything on top of that, because these two things, they have to be in order to sell their framework. But frameworks such as React, Angular, Vue, exactly. I actually did a video about that to kind of prove to you how silly it is to pick an SBA framework for its speed, because nothing that you can possibly make in a SBA framework is going to be faster than using vanilla JavaScript. But that's not the point. The point is that the framework gives you a controlled environment where you can create consistent results. That is why they are there. That's why you have it for basically every web server, that's why it's there to begin with. It's just a way for you to guarantee consistent results and save some time, but that comes with the price tag, which is that you pay you pay a price in a different way. It's just that for inexperienced software developers and philosophical idiots, they don't understand that. It's the whole problem with people who don't understand the problem and only look at the tooling. So that's why I keep on telling people that if you just take things at face value, you will never understand why you're doing things, and that is the main thing that determines whether or not you have a good release process or if your results are good. If you have people who don't understand what they're doing and they don't understand why they are doing things, if they are just following a process because they've been told that this is the way you do it without knowing why, then you will always, then that's the big problem. That's the problem that I have this with agile retards, or like retard is a strong word, but they're idiots. Idiots who do agile without understanding why they're doing agile. People who do apply Scrum or Safe, or they have canary releases for no reason, or they do hefty amounts of testing for applications that do not require hefty amounts of testing, things like that. They have QA teams doing manual testing for things when that process is so much faster than the development process. So the QA is literally just sitting around doing nothing for 90% of the time, and then writing a few end-to-end tests, or like a few tests at the end of it, and then you kind of just continue wasting tons and tons and tons of money on something that the developers are fully capable of doing as well. And this is the problem. I can't say it in a nicer way. Stupid people are the problem. The most detrimental shortcut there is in software development is stupid people. Because if you hire stupid people, if you have a bad hiring process, there is no system or rule set that is going to fix stupid people. That's not going. It's completely pointless to have all these other practices if you have stupid people. And a stupid person will apply, for example, all the possible gateways that a regular software development lifecycle strategy has to every single problem, and that's just not productive. I'll give you an example. where it's just a concrete example of something that a individual who doesn't understand what results mean, where they would not have understood how to solve that problem effectively. So I started in a team a while back where we basically were just two at the one moment, or we started out as 3 people and then we went down to 2 software developers. Now, in a normal, standard, agile work practice type of way, it doesn't really matter if you're using Kanban or Lean or Scrum or whatever. There is, as the subscriber is asking about, there is a life cycle. There's like a pattern to things. So you usually have you have a Kanban board or something like that where you progress through different steps. And a few steps in the work process of my company was, of course, to do code reviews and testing and so forth and so forth. And one part of the testing process was that you had to get your code tested by somebody else. Now, the problem was that, unfortunately, at that time, we didn't really have more than 2 people, and me, who was at the time also forced to literally learn by myself the entire system and be in every single meeting that you could possibly imagine, I simply did not have time to do the code reviews and do the manual testing of my coworker Story, who was hired to only do the coding. And so we discussed it, and we said basically that for a little while here, while I'm basically forced to learn the whole system, because if we don't, because we had this deadline where this person with all the domain knowledge, which was a whole different shit show, was going to leave the company. So I basically had to become the new tech lead, or like the new domain expert, within a very short amount of time. Which means that if that person leaves, and I don't get the proper handoff, which of course they are not very interested in giving you, then we're in a worse situation. So what did we do? Well, we said, okay, for a little while, I'm going to go to, in this case we're using GitHub, I'm going to go and disable the check that makes sure that you need to get an approval on your code review and like all that good stuff before you can merge and release. And the reason why I'm doing that is so that you put it up, we still do the motions, you put up your code for code review and like testing and so forth, and I will do the best, the darndest to my abilities based on in between all these meetings, and sometimes during the meetings, because some meetings were less important than others. I will just do a quick review, and then you can test it yourself, and then you can release it by yourself. We will remove that part of the process as soon as we get one more person, so that we know that you can get a consistent feedback loop going. Because if we don't, you will be like it will become a floodgate type of system where we can consistently release things, and batching things in large chunks of release, or like large chunks before you release something, is actually very dangerous. It's easier for you to just release something very quickly and do like a consistent type of thing than doing a lot of releases at the same time, because that narrows the scope of what can go wrong. Now, that is not in line with how the company wanted to do work. It's not in line with what most people would consider best practice, but it was a necessity for the moment, and it worked perfectly. Today we're back to doing the same sort of thing, but we opted out of that solution for this very reason. I have another coworker. I had a coworker as well, and I've had this conversation a million times. People who don't understand why something is a rule, or why we're doing something, and when it is appropriate to apply it, and when it's not appropriate to apply it. So an example was that I had this discussion with a coworker where he said to me that I'm noticing that we have all these REST clients that we're building, right? And I've noticed that we are duplicating a lot of our tests, and that's not very dry in my opinion. We should create a generic solution so that we don't have to test all of these different clients that connect to different systems. And I said, but the problem with your suggestion is that what you want is to create some type of implementation that checks whether or not the clients are behaving correctly and break that down to one single client. But we have many clients and they all have domain-specific logic because they're connecting to different data sources. So if you create a super version of this, you're basically going to have to batch together all the different connections. It's like it would be the equivalent of saying that, you know what, instead of having an SDK for Amazon, for Azure, for whatever in a cloud provider, they should just all batch it together into one super system instead. And that's a very bad design choice, so we made the same choice to not do that. So that's not really a good idea. But on the other hand, if we go with what you were saying, and we're simply creating some type of, in this case, in the suggestion was to create a super implementation that abstracts away all of the common logic, and then you just test that superclass, which was like the superclass of the different clients that we had. And because the idea was that then we could just test that logic once, and then we don't have to test it in all the other stuff. And I go, but the problem is that if you create a superclass implementation and you test just that, what guarantees do you have that someone doesn't just change the implementation in one of the other clients? If I internally remove the dependency on the super instance, or like the superclass for my different, in this case it was REST clients, then I'm not actually going to know that. My test, because the tests that we have right now are doing the thing a unit test is supposed to be doing. A unit test is supposed to assert that the contract and logic of a unit of code is working. And if you'd remove that, then you have no purpose of having the test anymore. So the duplication here, not being dry, is necessary to achieve the goal of asserting that the code is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Because the fact that that's why you do the green-red green or red-green red strategy, or like that's what test-driven development is all about. Because if you start at the interface, you will know that the interface, well, when you start and you look from the caller's perspective of any type of logic, you don't know the internals of the system, nor should you. That's the black box testing style. And the reason why you don't want to know that is because when you do the thing that my coworker was suggesting, you're basically creating a worse test that assumes that the system's code looks in a certain way. And if that ever changes, your test is no longer valid, or you're actually not testing the actual thing that you care about, and that is that the implementation of the interface, or like the function or whatever you're doing, that is working. So the dry principle is actually really stupid to apply in this scenario, because the actual reason why you're using dry is to reduce bugs and reduce work time. And neither of those things, as I explained to my coworker, neither of those things are an issue in this instance. But what you're suggesting is to actually break a very important principle in favor of something that you do not understand fully, or rather that's what I argue to him, that you don't fully understand, because you seem to forget that the value of the principle that you're following is what is important, not the fact that you're following the principle. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, there are much more detrimental quote-unquote shortcuts than skipping steps in the software development cycle. And the reason why I know that for a fact, guys, is because the development life cycle, what's considered best practice in terms of how you do testing, how you do different practices and so forth, it changes. And it's going to continue changing forever and ever and ever. It's the same reason why we have, evolution in laws and society, etc., etc. The way we do things change with how advanced we grow. And we find that some stuff is working better than other stuff, and sometimes we add things temporarily and realize that it was a bad idea, and then we move on to the next thing, etc., etc. So the most detrimental thing, if there is such a term, to have in terms of like what's going to damage your release process, or anything within your system, it's going to be stupid people, or applying things or doing things for no other reason than to do them. And if you are not able to figure out what a good idea looks like and what a bad idea looks like, then you don't fully understand the problem that you are solving. Because if you fully understand the problem that you are solving, you will know what you need to do in order to be able to make certain assertions about the thing that you are working on. And that, my friend, that is why all of this stuff exists. It's just a framework to help you do that thing. But no framework that you get from somebody else is going to be more effective than you actually having a real hard think about what do I need to do in order to make sure that my code is always working, we're always meeting our deadlines, and we don't have any types of issues within the team or anything like that. If you can meet these 3 criteria, nothing else matters. Have a great day.